Welcome everybody to Quantacast 11. My name's Tim MacKinley, the Chief Operating Officer here at Quanta. As always, I have Stacey Jones, our CEO, on my right.
Hi, Tim.
Hi, Stacey. And on my left, Chris Carrigan, our Head of Property Investments.
Hi, Tim.
How are you, Chris?
Good.
We're here today to talk about 2 to 10 Titanium Drive in Paget, Mackay, Queensland. But before we jump into that, and we all have seen the property and we've inspected the property, we should talk a little bit about my beard, I think, before we get going. So,
do we have to?
have we got a George Clooney vibe,
No,
Stacey, or a
no.
Kyle Sandilands, Chris?
Carl
Definitely
Sandilands.
Carl.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
We won't continue to talk about it then. Chris, I'm going to pass over to you. We have been up to this property as we go to all properties, and it's incredibly impressive. We do say that a lot. The last 4 acquisitions have been excellent for us. So, Chris, talk to us about why this is such a great opportunity for our investors.
It is a great opportunity, Tim. It's a really good mix of a low-risk investment with a very strong distribution profile, great potential for capital gain, and the distribution profile is very tax effective.
Fantastic. So let's start with the building. So what have we got here in terms of the building? What's it comprised of, and who's the tenant?
So we've got a 3,500 metre cold store facility in Paget. It's a very modern facility. It was built in 2012 and it is state of the art. It's the best cold store facility in the region. We've been around and toured each of them. That's our view, of course, but it's pretty easy to see the superior nature of the asset. The tenant is PFD, which is, and people may have seen the trucks driving around. They seem to be everywhere, particularly when you're buying an asset with a tenant. You see the trucks all the time. The company is 100% owned by Woolworths, and they're in there on a long-term lease, so they've got just over 4.5 years to go, and then they have 2 6-year options which take their potential tenure out to 2041.
So just to bring Stacey in, Stacey, we did go and view the property as we always do. We did drive around the Paget area and further than that, just have a look at the other cold stores. You know, what did you see in the other facilities there that we did research on?
There was nothing that that you would say even remotely competes with this asset. There was one that was a significantly larger style asset, but in terms of construction certainly looked to be an inferior quality. And then there were smaller ones that just would not suit the needs of a tenant of this kind. So in terms of demand for that type of asset, we're sitting strategically very well. The asset itself is maintained impeccably. If you'd said it was built 2 years ago, sure, you'd believe that. It has been maintained perfectly.
And Chris, thanks, Stacey. And when you look at the size of the vehicles that are distributing the things that are held in this storage, what is the main, I guess, what are they doing mainly at this facility?
As we mentioned, cold store logistics facility. So refrigerated trucks use that as a central distribution point to take refrigerated or frozen produce to the customers of PFD. So that's cafes, bars, restaurants, clubs, correctional facilities.
Some mining. I think there's some mining camps. That's a big one for them too, is it?
Yeah, of course, being in that part of the world. And so there's dry storage and cold storage. In the temperature controlled areas of about 1,500 square metres, there's freezer at negative 17 degrees.
Which we found out was pretty cold when we were there.
I'd just been back from Canada, so it was like a bit of a flashback.
It was
refresher. Then there is the cold store, which is 2 to 4 degrees, and then there is temperature control, which is 17 degrees, and combined they're about 1,500 square metres. Then there's about 1,000 square metres of dry storage, and they're all they're storing effectively cooking and catering products.
Sure. And look, there's about 600 metres of office.
There is. That's for administration reception.
Yeah. And it looked pretty modern when we went through there, and well kept as well. Yes. Now, in terms of distribution, Chris, let's get into that in a little bit more detail. Where do we start? Where do we finish? What's the average?
It's got a really attractive distribution profile. Year 1, 8.5%, growing to 9.5% in year 5, which is the anticipated term of this investment, averaging 9%, and those numbers are net of all fees, net of all expenses, and paid monthly.
Yeah, that is very generous, Chris, and I'm sure our investors will snap that up. Is there a tax deferred component associated with that?
because this is a really modern facility, the tax deferred aspect of this investment is really compelling. Year one, 100% of the distributions are tax deferred. Over the 5-year investment, we anticipate over 90% of the distributions to be tax deferred.
Excellent.
So that's the strongest tax deferred profile we've ever offered to investors.
Once again, another plus for the investors. Stacey, when we're on site, I personally walked around with one of the key operators on site for PFD. You did as well. You wandered around with some of the other people that work there. What was the sentiment from them on the facility?
The gentleman who showed us around or took the lead of showing us around, he said that not only was it a significantly superior site to where they'd come from, which I understand is still sitting empty, he said that his staff were getting to the point that they weren't necessarily enjoying coming to work in the old premises, but they love where they are now because it's state of the art. Everything works exactly as it should and it services their needs perfectly.
I think he said to us that they had zero downtime, which is clearly super important. And Chris, I think there's an additional compressor in the refrigeration piece so that 3 of those compressors are always working. However, if one has an issue, then the other one kicks in. They've always got a secondary supply. Is that right?
Yeah, look, we're told that there's $17 million of stock in these cold rooms. So it's really important that the function of the services does not is not anything other than continuous. So there's redundancy for everything. There's backup generators, there's backup compressors. It's just built for every scenario.
And built by Hutchinsons, who have got a very, very good reputation for doing high quality builds.
And they can monitor it all from off-site. Yeah. So he was saying, he gets a notification in the middle of the night if anything's going on, if there's a temperature change, and so that wasn't a luxury they had before. Stacey,
talk to me a little bit about the purchaser in this process.
So this one came to us off-market via an agent with a private seller. He is in the seafood game, very well known in that region, very successful business, and he originally had this asset built for himself. So that is precisely why it is overspec'd and built so well, because he intended on occupying it himself and did for some time. Seafood is his game, property isn't, and for that reason we found that a few parts of the lease were a bit uncommon. No risks that were presented by any of it, but just not what you typically see in a lease of this nature. And I think that would have put a few purchasers off. But through the due diligence process and the contract negotiations, we were able to cover off on those and get it structured in a way that works very well for us and for investors. And so we're very happy to proceed.
Excellent. Which is going to be hopefully a good end result for when we sell out of this, and I think we've identified a 4 to 5 year 4 or 5 when we look to sell out. Chris, talk to me a little bit about the strategy on the exit on this particular property.
Yeah, well, look, it's a very simple deliverable strategy, Tim. So the property is very under rented in a very constrained market. So our strategy is to pay strong distributions on the way through. Upon renewal of the tenant, achieve a rental increase to revert to market, and on that increased rent, dispose of the property for a significant capital gain. So we think the difference between the passing rent and the market rent is significant. So passing rent, as I may have mentioned, is $240 per square metre. The market rent is more in the order of $350 per square metre. So we think that's a substantial uplift in net income for the property upon renewal, and that obviously has a corresponding effect to capital value.
So moving on from that, Stacey, this investment won't stick around for long. We know that. Talk to us a little bit about what we've seen in the response to the expression of interest that went out for us recording yesterday. So talk to us a little bit about the response so far.
Well, we never offer up an opportunity that we don't think is going to be well received. So I know we always say it's going to be well received, and fortunately we've been right. But this one, I think, even surprised us. We went out asking for expressions of interest, and if they were all to convert, we're 3 times over what we need. Now we know that they always don't, so I don't be put off by that, because inevitably things change between people expressing that interest and when it comes time to applications. But I say that because if you are genuinely interested and you think you've got more than a day or so, I think you're going to be sorely mistaken. The last one went in a day and it had nowhere near the level of interest that this one did. So if you want to get in, get your application in ASAP. If you need to check with Dave and Brock to make sure that all of your ID, everything like that is in line so that you can do it as quickly as possible, do so. But don't wait around.
Thanks, Stacey. Chris, as we get towards the end of our Quantacast for today and for this particular investment, there has been some questions that have come out of the EOI from our investors around, have we had the valuation support? Now, is the property easily to insure, and also some of the building materials that are associated with the cold storage. Can you answer some of those questions for us?
Sure. So on the valuation query, yes, we have valuation support by a third party independent valuer for the purchase, and I don't think we mentioned it during the recording here today, but yeah, $10.55 million is the purchase price, and that's been supported by an external valuer. So
comfortably supported, from what I understand.
We've had no trouble.
Yep. Great.
No problem. So the second question was insurance. Yes, we had no problem getting insurance. So we've got insurance cover ready to go as soon as we approach settlement. Well, typically we usually affect that policy from once we exercise the option.
And Chris, lastly, talk to me just quickly about the fabric of the building.
Yeah, look, Tim, it's tilt panel construction internally. The refrigeration paneling, which we looked at really closely, and you have got to look at really closely in these assets, got the tick of approval by our TDD, technical due diligence consultant, and it's current industry standard.
Thanks, Chris. Let's just highlight the metrics before we finish up today. So I've got PFD as the tenant, who's 100% owned by Woolworths, which is fantastic. They're on a sort of 4.5-year WALE, so 4.5 years left on the current lease with 2 6-year options on the back of that. A really strong distribution of 9% average. You're very bullish about the capital uplift on the sale in, say, 4 or 5 years as we reset that lease. And we're gonna once again put out a closed-end fund, so 7-year term at the max. And if we want to extend that, we need to go back to our investors.
Correct.
Sound good?
Sounds great.
Stacey, thanks for being here. Chris, thanks for being here. Thanks to everybody who's put an EOI in and for your support. And we look forward to bringing you another Quantacast soon.